When my father died at 73, I was devastated. He'd been my rock, my mentor, the parent who actually cared about my well-being. My brother Marcus? He saw dollar signs the moment Dad flatlined. I'm Rebecca, 42, a high school guidance counselor in Phoenix. Marcus is 38, a wannabe entrepreneur who'd burned through 3 failed businesses and lived off Dad's generosity for years. The difference between us? Dad trusted me with his real secrets. The funeral was on a rainy Tuesday in March. I'd spent weeks arranging everything: the service, the flowers, the reception, the burial plot. Marcus showed up hungover, complained about the cheap casket, and disappeared after 20 minutes. Where's Marcus? Aunt Linda asked during the reception. Probably handling estate business. I lied, covering for him like I always did. But I knew better. 3 months earlier, Dad had pulled me aside during one of his chemo treatments. Becca, I need to tell you something about the will, he'd whispered, gripping my hand. I'm leaving everything to both of you, but there's a catch. Marcus gets his half only if he can prove he's been sober for 6 months and held the same job for a year. Dad, he'll never. Exactly. Which is why you're the executor. Everything's in your name until he meets those conditions. The house, the accounts, the life insurance, $1.2 million total. Dad died knowing Marcus would fail the sobriety test. What he didn't know was how spectacularly. After the funeral, I drove home exhausted and heartbroken. That's when I got the first suspicious call. Ms. Williams? This is Janet from First National Bank. We need to discuss some unusual account activity. What kind of activity? Someone claiming to be the estate executor tried to withdraw $400,000 from your father's account this morning. The signature doesn't match our records. My blood went cold. What name did they give? Marcus Williams. Should we be concerned? I hung up and immediately called Dad's lawyer, Robert Shen. No relation to the insurance villain from our previous story. Rebecca, I was just about to call you, Shen said grimly. Marcus came to my office an hour ago demanding to see the will. When I explained the sobriety clause, he became violent. Security had to escort him out. Robert, I think he's going to try something. I agree. That's why I'm recommending we install security cameras at your father's house immediately. If Marcus is planning something illegal, we need evidence. The next morning, I drove to Dad's house in Scottsdale, the house I'd grown up in, where I'd nursed him through cancer, where we'd had our last conversation about Marcus's problems. The security company installed 6 hidden cameras throughout the house: living room, kitchen, master bedroom, home office, garage, and front entrance. Each camera was motion activated and sent alerts directly to my phone. The system's completely invisible, the technician explained, and it uploads everything to the cloud automatically. That evening, I got the first alert. Motion detected, front door, 11:47 p.m. I opened the app and watched my brother stumble into Dad's house using a key I didn't know he had. He wasn't alone. 3 women in barely their outfits followed him inside, along with 2 men I didn't recognize. One of the men was carrying bottles of expensive champagne. One of the women was live streaming on her phone. Welcome to the millionaire's mansion. Marcus slurred into the camera. My old man finally croaked and left me everything. I watched in horror as they turned Dad's sacred space into a party house. They were doing lines of cocaine off Dad's dining room table, the table where we'd eaten Sunday dinners for 20 years. The women were stripping in Dad's living room while Marcus threw cash at them like confetti. This is just the beginning, Marcus shouted. Tomorrow I'm buying a Ferrari. Maybe 2. But the most devastating moment came when one of the women asked, "What about your sister? Doesn't she get anything?" Marcus laughed coldly. "That uptight bitch? She's a school counselor making $40,000 a year. She doesn't deserve Dad's money. She was always his favorite. But I'm the son. I'm the one who inherits everything." He pulled out his phone and made a video call. I couldn't hear the other person, but Marcus was clearly talking to someone at a bank. "Yeah, it's Marcus Williams. I need to make a large withdrawal first thing tomorrow morning. The old man's funeral was today, so everything should be cleared up." "What do you mean probate?" "I'm the son. The money's mine." The party continued until 4 a.m. I recorded everything: the drug use, the sex acts, the vandalism, Marcus's drunken confessions about forging signatures and lying to banks. By morning, I had 8 hours of footage that would destroy him completely. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd live-streamed parts of the party on Instagram and TikTok. Videos of him snorting cocaine and throwing our father's money at strippers while bragging about his inheritance were already going viral. The internet was about to meet Marcus Williams. And Marcus was about to learn that executors have more power than he imagined. Because while he was partying, I was planning the most thorough legal destruction in family history. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and watching Marcus's social media explode. The videos of him partying at Dad's house had been viewed 2.3 million times overnight. The comments were brutal. Celebrating his father's death with cocaine and strippers? This is disgusting. Someone needs to report this to the police. This looks like theft and drug use. That poor father worked his whole life just to have his son disrespect his memory like this. But the most damaging comment came from someone who recognized our address. I know this house. David Williams died yesterday. This is his son spending inheritance money while the body's barely cold. My phone rang. It was Robert Chun, Dad's lawyer. Rebecca, have you seen the internet this morning? All of it. Marcus live-streamed everything. This is actually perfect for us. The will specifically states that Marcus forfeits his inheritance if he engages in illegal drug use or behavior that dishonors the family name. He just provided video evidence of both. What's our next move? Marcus is at First National Bank right now trying to access your father's accounts. I've already called them. They're stalling him while we prepare an injunction. Can you meet me at the courthouse in an hour? At the bank, Marcus was having the meltdown of his life. Security cameras captured him screaming at the branch manager. I'm the son. The money is mine. You can't deny me access to my own inheritance. Sir, as I explained, the accounts are frozen pending probate. The executor must authorize all withdrawals. My sister isn't the executor. I am. She's just a nobody school counselor. The branch manager showed Marcus the official documentation. I watched his face turn white as he read the will for the first time. This is fake, he whispered. Dad wouldn't do this to me. Meanwhile, I was at the courthouse with Robert Chun, filing emergency motions to permanently bar Marcus from accessing any estate assets, obtain a restraining order preventing him from entering Dad's property, report his drug use to local police based on video evidence, initiate proceedings to have him declared unfit to inherit. But Marcus wasn't done destroying himself. That afternoon, he posted a 20-minute video rant on Instagram Live, clearly still under the influence. My uptight sister thinks she can steal my inheritance. Dad left me that money because I'm the man of the family. Rebecca's just jealous because she's a lonely spinster who could never make real money. He went on to detail his plans for the inheritance. A new Porsche, a house in Miami, and starting a high-end escort business with the women from last night's party. I'm going to contest this will. He slurred into the camera. No judge will side with some pathetic school counselor over the son. Men inherit everything. That's how it works. The video had 847,000 views within 3 hours. But Marcus had made a critical error. He just admitted on camera to planning to use Dad's money for prostitution, which is federal money laundering if the amounts are large enough. That evening, Detective Sarah Morrison, coincidentally sharing a name with Linda Morrison from our insurance story, called me. Ms. Williams, we've reviewed the videos your brother posted. We have enough evidence to charge him with cocaine possession, criminal trespass, and potentially money laundering conspiracy. How would you like to proceed? I want him to face the full consequences of his actions. The next morning brought the ultimate twist. Marcus had hired a lawyer, a sleazy ambulance chaser named Tony Ricci, who immediately called a press conference. My client Marcus Williams is the victim of an elaborate scheme by his greedy sister to steal his rightful inheritance, Ricci announced to local news cameras. We have evidence that Rebecca Williams manipulated their dying father and forged documents to cut out the rightful heir. What Ricci didn't know was that I'd spent the night preparing my own press conference. At noon, I stood outside the courthouse with Robert Chun and played a compilation of Marcus's videos for the assembled media. Marcus doing cocaine. The old man finally croaked. Marcus with strippers. My sister doesn't deserve Dad's money. Marcus on Instagram. I'm going to use this inheritance for my escort business. Ladies and gentlemen, I said calmly, this is how my brother chose to honor our father's memory. Every dollar he spent last night was money intended for Dad's cancer treatment that we never got to use. The reporters were stunned. Channel 12's anchor asked, Ms. Williams, what do you want people to know about your brother's behavior? I want people to understand that inheritance isn't just money, it's trust. Our father worked 50 years as a mechanic to build that savings. He survived Vietnam, raised 2 children alone after our mother died, and battled cancer with dignity. Marcus destroyed that legacy in one night of partying. But I saved the best revelation for last. There's something else Marcus doesn't know, I continued. Our father left detailed instructions that if Marcus proved unfit to inherit, his share should go to the Phoenix Children's Hospital Cancer Ward, where Dad volunteered for 5 years after his diagnosis. So Marcus isn't just losing his inheritance, he's taking money away from sick children. The camera panned to Marcus and Tony Ricci watching from across the street. Marcus looked like he'd been punched in the gut. That night, Marcus called me for the first time since the funeral. Rebecca, we need to talk. No, Marcus. We really don't. You can't do this to me. I'm your brother. You stopped being my brother when you turned Dad's house into a crack den. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Marcus said something that revealed just how little he understood about consequences. Fine. But when I contest this will and win, you'll get nothing. Nothing. I smiled as I hung up the phone. Because tomorrow, Marcus would learn that the viral videos he'd posted had attracted attention from more than just social media users. The IRS had questions about his cash spending. The DEA wanted to know about his drug suppliers. And the FBI was very interested in his escort business plans. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone destroy themselves while you document everything. 3 days after Marcus's public meltdown, federal agents knocked on his apartment door at 6 a.m. I wasn't there to see it, but his neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez livestreamed the whole thing on Facebook, and it went viral within hours. Marcus Williams, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, cocaine possession with intent to distribute, and fraud, announced FBI Special Agent David Martinez. Marcus stumbled to the door in his underwear, still drunk from the night before. This is about my inheritance, isn't it? My sister called you. Sir, this is about the Instagram videos where you detailed plans to use inherited funds for illegal prostitution activities. Agent Martinez replied calmly. That's federal money laundering. What Marcus didn't realize was that one of the escorts from his party was actually an undercover federal informant investigating a human trafficking ring. When Marcus bragged on video about starting an escort business with inherited money, he'd confessed to a federal crime while being recorded by law enforcement. But the real twist came that afternoon when Detective Sarah Morrison called me with news that changed everything. Rebecca, we've been investigating the women from your brother's party. 2 of them are underage, 16 and 17 years old with fake IDs. Marcus is now facing charges for contributing to the delinquency of minors and soliciting prostitution from minors. My blood went cold. Detective Marcus is an idiot, but I don't think he knowingly. The videos show him handing cash directly to minors in exchange for sexual services. Intent doesn't matter. The acts are on camera. He's looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. That evening, Marcus called me from county jail. His voice was broken and desperate. Rebecca, please. You have to help me. They're saying I'm a predator. I didn't know those girls were underage. I swear to God. Marcus, I can't help you. And after what you did to Dad's house. I was grieving. I was drunk and stupid, but I'm not a criminal. You did cocaine on Dad's dining room table. You hired prostitutes with money you tried to steal. You live-streamed it all while bragging about dishonoring his memory. You are a criminal. But Marcus had one more surprise coming. The next morning, Tony Ricci, his sleazy lawyer, called another press conference. This time he had Marcus's ex-wife Jennifer with him. My client Marcus Williams is the victim of a malicious prosecution orchestrated by his vindictive sister, Ricci announced. Ms. Jennifer Williams will testify that Rebecca has been planning to steal her brother's inheritance for years. Jennifer stepped to the microphone looking nervous. She'd divorced Marcus 3 years earlier after he'd cheated on her and emptied their joint savings for a failed cryptocurrency scheme. Rebecca always resented Marcus, Jennifer said shakily. She manipulated their dying father and planted drugs at the party to frame Marcus. I watched the press conference from my school office, surrounded by my concerned colleagues. My principal, Dr. Martinez, no relation to the FBI agent, put her hand on my shoulder. Rebecca, you don't have to respond to these lies. But I already had my response prepared. That afternoon, I held my own press conference outside the courthouse. I brought photo albums, financial records, and character witnesses, including 3 of my father's doctors. Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Williams divorced my brother after he stole $47,000 from their joint account to invest in a fake cryptocurrency scam. I began, holding up divorce papers. She's being paid $10,000 by Tony Ricci to lie about me. I showed the crowd photos of Marcus throughout the years. Passed out drunk at family dinners, arrested for DUI twice, fired from 6 different jobs for stealing or showing up intoxicated. This isn't about one night of bad judgment, I continued. This is about a lifetime pattern of destructive behavior that my father tried desperately to change before he died. Then I played the audio recording that destroyed Marcus completely. 6 months before Dad died, during one of his chemotherapy sessions, I'd recorded our conversation about the will. Dad's weak voice filled the courthouse steps. "Becca, I love Marcus, but he's going to kill himself with drugs and alcohol if I enable him anymore. The inheritance has conditions because I want him to get clean, not because I want to punish him. If he can stay sober for 6 months and hold a job for a year, the money is his. But if he can't meet those basic requirements, I want the money to help other people, people who will use it to build something good instead of destroying themselves." The reporters were silent. Even Tony Ricci looked uncomfortable. "My father wasn't trying to cheat Marcus out of his inheritance," I said, tears in my eyes. "He was trying to save Marcus's life." The party at Dad's house proved that Dad made the right decision. That night, the story went national. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all covered the inheritance party scandal. Marcus Williams became a social media joke. But more importantly, he became a cautionary tale about addiction, family dysfunction, and the consequences of viral stupidity. But the story took its final twist 3 weeks later. Marcus, facing serious federal charges and public humiliation, finally got sober in jail. He wrote me a letter that arrived on a Tuesday morning. "Rebecca, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that Dad was right. I am an addict. I have been since high school." The inheritance party wasn't grief. It was the culmination of 20 years of drug and alcohol abuse that I was too proud to admit. I'm pleading guilty to all charges. I'm going to prison for probably 8 to 12 years. But for the first time in my adult life, I'm sober. And I understand why Dad put those conditions in the will. I want you to know that I'm dropping the will contest. The money should go to the children's hospital like Dad wanted. Those kids deserve a chance that I never gave myself. I'm sorry I turned Dad's funeral into a nightmare. I'm sorry I dishonored his memory. And I'm sorry it took federal prison to make me realize what an addict looks like. Take care of yourself, sis. You're the good one. You always were. 6 months later, I stood in the children's cancer ward at Phoenix Children's Hospital, presenting a check for $600,000 to Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the other Chens in our stories. This donation will fund 2 years of chemotherapy treatments for children whose families can't afford them, Dr. Chen announced to the gathered families and media. In the audience sat 12-year-old Emma Rodriguez, whose leukemia treatment was now fully funded by Dad's legacy. Her mother was crying with relief. As I watched Emma smile and wave at the cameras, I thought about Marcus sitting in federal prison, finally getting the addiction treatment Dad had hoped for. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to someone becomes the thing that saves their life. And sometimes, the best way to honor your father's memory is to turn his money into hope for other families. Dad would have been proud. 1 year after Marcus's arrest, I received an unexpected call that would turn our family tragedy into something even more complex. It was Jennifer, Marcus's ex-wife, calling from Los Angeles. "Rebecca, you need to know something about the videos Marcus posted," she said, her voice shaking. "I lied at that press conference. Tony Ricci didn't pay me $10,000 to lie about you." "Jennifer, what are you talking about?" "He paid me $50,000. And there's something else. Marcus wasn't the only one stealing from your father." I nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" "During our marriage, Marcus told me that your dad's financial advisor, Michael Stevens, had been skimming money from his accounts for years. Marcus was blackmailing Stevens. That's how he got the money for his failed businesses. Michael Stevens had managed Dad's investments for 15 years. I trusted him completely during Dad's illness, giving him power of attorney to handle financial decisions when Dad was too sick to manage them himself." "Jennifer, why are you telling me this now?" "Because Stevens approached me last week. He wants to hire me to testify that the inheritance party videos were staged. That you and Marcus planned the whole thing to create a viral story and split Dad's money. That's insane. Marcus is in federal prison. Stevens claims the prison letter where Marcus dropped the will contest was forged by you. He's prepared to pay me $200,000 to support that story in court. I hung up and immediately called Robert Shun, our family lawyer. Robert, I think Michael Stevens has been embezzling from Dad's estate. Rebecca, I've actually been investigating Stevens for the past 6 months. The Phoenix District Attorney's Office contacted me after reviewing your father's financial records as part of Marcus's case. What did they find? Stevens moved approximately $340,000 from your father's accounts over 3 years, disguising the transfers as investment management fees and portfolio rebalancing costs. Your father never authorized those transactions. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Stevens had been stealing from Dad while Dad was fighting cancer. Marcus had been blackmailing Stevens with evidence of the theft. And now Stevens was trying to frame me to cover up both crimes. But Stevens had made a crucial mistake. He kept detailed records of his payments to Marcus, thinking he could use them as evidence of Marcus's drug problems if needed. Those records proved both the embezzlement and the blackmail scheme. 3 days later, Detective Sarah Morrison called with an update that changed everything again. Rebecca, we arrested Michael Stevens this morning. But during his interrogation, he revealed something that's going to shock you. More than finding out our financial advisor was a thief, Stevens claims your father knew about the embezzlement for the past year. According to Stevens, your father was planning to use evidence of the theft to have Marcus arrested before Marcus could inherit anything. The implications hit me like a truck. Dad hadn't just been protecting Marcus from his addiction, he'd been protecting the family from Marcus's criminal association with Stevens. Detective Morrison, are you saying Dad knew Marcus was blackmailing our financial advisor? Stevens has documentation showing your father hired a private investigator 6 months before his death. The investigator discovered both the embezzlement and Marcus's blackmail scheme. That afternoon, I met with the private investigator Dad had hired, a former FBI agent named Patricia Rodriguez, no relation to Emma's mother from the Children's Hospital. Your father was heartbroken when he learned about Marcus's involvement with Stevens, Patricia explained, showing me photos and financial records Dad had commissioned. But he was also determined to protect you from being dragged into their criminal conspiracy. How long had Marcus been blackmailing Stevens? 2 years. Marcus discovered the embezzlement by accident when he tried to steal money directly from your father's accounts. Instead of reporting Stevens, Marcus demanded monthly payments to stay quiet. Patricia opened a thick folder containing bank records, recorded phone calls, and photographic surveillance of Marcus meeting with Stevens. Your father's plan was to have both Marcus and Stevens arrested after his death, ensuring that neither could touch the inheritance. The will conditions weren't just about Marcus's sobriety. They were about giving law enforcement time to build criminal cases against both men. The recorded phone calls were devastating. In one conversation from 3 months before Dad died, Marcus told Stevens, "The old man's got 6 months left, maybe less. After he's gone, we're going to need a new arrangement." Stevens replied, "Marcus, when your father dies, we split the remaining assets 50-50 and disappear. Your sister will never figure out what happened." But Dad had figured it out, and he'd planned his revenge from beyond the grave. 2 weeks later, both Stevens and Marcus were charged under the Federal RICO Act as co-conspirators in an organized theft scheme targeting elderly individuals. The FBI discovered that Stevens had been running similar embezzlement operations on 12 other elderly clients, with Marcus serving as his blackmail enforcer on 3 of those cases. The story made national headlines. Father's final revenge. Dead man's investigation exposes $1 million elder abuse ring. As I sat in the federal courthouse watching Stevens get sentenced to 18 years in prison, I realized that Dad's will wasn't just about inheritance conditions. It was an elaborate trap designed to catch the people who'd been stealing from our family for years. Marcus called me that night from federal prison, where he was serving his expanded sentence for racketeering. "Rebecca, I found out Dad knew everything. The private investigator visited me yesterday." "I know, Marcus. Dad could have had me arrested while he was alive. He could have saved himself $340,000 and destroyed my life years ago. Why didn't he?" For the first time in our adult relationship, I heard genuine remorse in Marcus's voice. "Because he loved you, Marcus. He hoped you'd get clean and make different choices. The inheritance conditions weren't punishment. They were Dad giving you one last chance to be the son he believed you could become. I destroyed that chance. Yes, you did. But Dad's plan worked anyway. Stevens is in prison, the stolen money is being recovered, and other elderly victims are getting justice. Sometimes the best revenge is making sure the truth eventually comes out, even if you're not alive to see it. 2 years after Stevens's conviction, I thought our family nightmare was finally over. The stolen money had been recovered, Marcus was getting clean in prison, and I'd donated Dad's inheritance to the children's hospital as planned. Then I received a package that turned everything upside down again. It arrived on a Tuesday morning with no return address, just a manila envelope containing a USB drive and a handwritten note. Rebecca, your father wasn't the only victim. There are 12 other families. The evidence is on this drive. Michael Stevens was just the beginning. A concerned friend. I plugged the drive into my laptop and found hundreds of files. Bank records, email correspondence, and surveillance footage dating back 5 years. What I discovered made me sick to my stomach. Stevens hadn't been working alone. He was part of a sophisticated elder abuse network operating across Arizona, California, and Nevada. The conspiracy involved corrupt financial advisors, crooked lawyers, and even staff members at assisted living facilities who identified wealthy elderly clients as targets. The files showed that Dad was patient number 7 in their system. They'd been monitoring his health, finances, and family situation for 3 years before Stevens made his move. Marcus's blackmail had been an unexpected complication, but they'd used it to their advantage by letting Marcus steal smaller amounts while they embezzled the larger sums. But the most shocking revelation was in a folder labeled Final Solutions. When elderly clients became too suspicious or their health improved, making theft more difficult, the network had a horrifying backup plan. They'd arrange for their clients to have accidents or sudden health crises that would expedite death and inheritance transfers. A recorded phone conversation from 8 months before Dad died made my blood run cold. Stevens. Williams is getting suspicious about the investment losses. His daughter's asking too many questions. Unknown voice. How's his health? Stevens. Chemo's working better than expected. He might have another 2 years. Unknown voice. 2 years is too long. We need to expedite the timeline. Stevens. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Unknown voice. I'm suggesting his cancer treatment might become less effective. Dr. Harrison at Desert Valley Oncology is very understanding about these situations. I nearly vomited. They'd been planning to kill my father. I immediately called Detective Morrison, who rushed to my house with FBI agent Martinez and 2 other federal investigators I'd never met. Rebecca, where did you get this evidence? Agent Martinez asked, reviewing the files. Someone mailed it anonymously. Agent Martinez, did they murder my father? We don't know yet, but we're opening a federal investigation immediately. This conspiracy involves at least 4 states and potentially dozens of victims. The files contain contact information for other families who'd been targeted. Over the next week, I made the most difficult phone calls of my life, reaching out to sons and daughters who'd lost parents under suspicious circumstances. Margaret Chen in Las Vegas, no relation to our various Chens, broke down crying when I explained what we'd discovered. My mother died suddenly during chemo treatments that were supposed to be working. The doctor said it was unexpected treatment failure. Now you're telling me they might have murdered her. David Rodriguez in Phoenix, no relation to Emma or Patricia, had a similar story. Dad's financial advisor convinced him to change his will 2 weeks before he died. We always thought it was suspicious, but we couldn't prove anything. By the end of the week, we'd identified 17 families who'd been victimized by the network. The total theft exceeded $12 million, and 8 elderly clients had died under suspicious circumstances after questioning financial irregularities. The FBI investigation, codenamed Operation Golden Years, became the largest elder abuse prosecution in U.S. history. Raids conducted simultaneously across 4 states netted 23 arrests, including financial advisors, attorneys, medical staff, and administrative personnel at 3 assisted living facilities. But the biggest shock came when they arrested Dr. Jennifer Harrison, the oncologist who'd been sabotaging cancer treatments. During her interrogation, she revealed that Dad had figured out the medical conspiracy weeks before he died. David Williams came to me demanding to know why his treatment had become less effective, Dr. Harrison confessed. He'd done his own research and suspected someone was tampering with his medications. I told him it was just disease progression, but he didn't believe me. He said he was going to report me to the medical board. I told Stevens that Williams was becoming too much of a problem. Stevens said he'd handle it. The autopsy Dad's body had never needed was finally performed. The results showed traces of a medication that deliberately counteracted his chemotherapy, causing his cancer to spread aggressively in his final months. My father had been murdered for trying to protect his family from financial predators. 3 days later, I received a call that changed my perspective on everything that had happened. Rebecca, this is Patricia Rodriguez, the private investigator your father hired. I need to meet with you immediately. Ms. Rodriguez, I thought you'd told us everything already. Elite. Your father made me promise to reveal the full truth only if something happened to him. He knew they were going to kill him. That afternoon, Patricia showed me Dad's final instructions, written 2 weeks before his death. If you're reading this, it means they succeeded in murdering me. Rebecca, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this nightmare, but I've given Patricia everything she needs to destroy them all. The inheritance conditions weren't just about Marcus. They were about buying time for federal investigators to build cases against everyone involved in my murder. I love you, sweetheart. Get justice for all of us. 6 months later, I testified before a Senate subcommittee on elder abuse as Congress passed the David Williams Elder Protection Act, establishing federal penalties for medical professionals who participate in financial exploitation of elderly patients. Dr. Harrison received life in prison for multiple counts of murder. Stevens got an additional 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Marcus, whose blackmail had actually disrupted the network's plans and potentially saved other lives, had his sentence reduced to 8 years in recognition of his inadvertent assistance to law enforcement. As I stood at Dad's grave on the 3rd anniversary of his death, I realized that his final revenge had extended far beyond our family. The 23 criminals now serving federal sentences had been stopped from victimizing dozens more elderly people. Sometimes the greatest revenge is making sure the people who killed you can never hurt anyone else again. 5 years after Dad's murder, I stood before the Senate Judiciary Committee as the star witness in hearings about the David Williams Elder Protection Act. The investigation that began with Marcus's drunken party videos had grown into the largest elder abuse prosecution in U.S. history. Ms. Williams, Senator Patricia Morrison asked, no relation to the various Morrisons in our stories. Can you explain to the committee how your father's murder case ultimately led to exposing this nationwide conspiracy? Senator, my father knew he was going to be killed. He used his final months to gather evidence and set a trap that would work even after his death. The inheritance conditions in his will weren't just about protecting our family money. They were about giving federal investigators time to build cases against everyone involved in a multi-state elder murder network. Behind me in the gallery sat families of 17 other victims who'd been murdered by the conspiracy. Margaret Chen dabbed her eyes as I described how her mother's sudden treatment failure had actually been medical sabotage designed to accelerate her death and inheritance transfer. But the hearing took an unexpected turn when Senator Rodriguez asked about the investigation's most shocking discovery. Ms. Williams, tell the committee about Operation Golden Year's final revelation. I took a deep breath. 6 months ago, FBI agents discovered that the network had been expanding internationally. They'd partnered with similar organizations in Canada, the UK, and Australia to target wealthy elderly Americans living abroad. And what was their ultimate plan? Complete systematic elimination of what they called financially significant elders, essentially wealthy seniors without strong family support systems. They'd identified over 2,000 potential victims across 4 countries, and were planning coordinated attacks designed to look like natural deaths during the COVID recovery period. The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. This was the first time the international scope had been revealed publicly. Senator Chen leaned forward. Ms. Williams, how did investigators discover this international conspiracy? Through Marcus, actually. While in federal prison, my brother was approached by inmates who were part of a separate elder abuse network operating out of Florida. When they learned about his connection to the Stevens case, they tried to recruit him for international operations. And your brother? Marcus became an FBI informant. For the past 2 years, he's been providing intelligence about elder abuse networks operating in federal prisons. His information led to the international breakthrough. What I didn't tell the committee was that Marcus's transformation had been genuine. 3 months earlier, he'd called me from prison with news that changed our relationship forever. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something about the night I had that party." "Marcus, we've been through this." "No, listen. I wasn't just drunk and high. I was planning to kill myself that night." The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I'd decided that after Dad died, I was going to overdose in his house. The party wasn't celebration, it was my suicide event. I wanted to die surrounded by all the destructive things that had ruined my life. Marcus. But when the FBI arrested me and I saw those videos, I realized Dad had been trying to save me even from beyond the grave. The inheritance conditions weren't punishment. They were Dad's last attempt to force me to get clean before I killed myself. Why are you telling me this now? Because working with the FBI on these elder abuse cases has shown me how many families are destroyed by addiction and greed. I want to help stop it. When I get out in 3 years, I want to work with you on the foundation Dad would have wanted. The committee hearing concluded with unanimous support for the David Williams Elder Protection Act, which established federal death penalties for anyone who murders elderly individuals for financial gain. But the day's most emotional moment came when I was approached by a woman I'd never met. "Ms. Williams, I'm Dr. Emma Rodriguez from the Pediatric Oncology Unit at Phoenix Children's Hospital." "Dr. Rodriguez, thank you for everything you've done with Dad's donation. Actually, I wanted to tell you about a patient of ours. Her name is Jennifer Williams, no relation to you, but an interesting coincidence." She showed me a photo of an 8-year-old girl with bright eyes and a bald head from chemotherapy. Jennifer was diagnosed with the same type of cancer that killed your father. Thanks to your dad's inheritance donation, we were able to provide her with the newest experimental treatments. She's been cancer-free for 6 months now. Dr. Rodriguez, does she know where the funding came from? She asked to meet the family who made her treatment possible. Would you be willing? 2 weeks later, I sat in the children's hospital playroom with Jennifer and her parents. The little girl had made me a drawing. A man in heaven handing medicine to sick children on earth. "Miss Rebecca, is your daddy really in heaven helping sick kids like me?" I looked at her innocent face and thought about Dad's final plan, how his murder had ultimately saved hundreds of elderly lives and was now funding pediatric cancer treatments. "Yes, Jennifer. My daddy is helping lots of people, even though he's not here anymore. Can you tell him thank you from me?" That night, I visited Dad's grave for the first time since the Senate hearing. As I placed Jennifer's drawing on his headstone, I realized that Dad's revenge had evolved into something much greater than justice. His murder had created a legacy of protection for the most vulnerable members of society, both the elderly and children fighting for their lives. Sometimes the best revenge is turning your death into other people's salvation. 3 years after the David Williams Elder Protection Act passed, I received a call that brought the story full circle in the most unexpected way. It was Marcus, calling from the minimum security federal facility where he'd been transferred after his cooperation with the FBI. "Rebecca, you're not going to believe this. Remember Jennifer, my ex-wife who lied at that press conference? What about her, Marcus? She's here, in the women's facility next to mine. She was arrested last month as part of another elder abuse ring that was using divorced women as front people to seduce wealthy widowers." I felt sick to my stomach. "Marcus, please tell me you didn't know about that when you were married to her." "I swear I didn't. But Rebecca, there's something else. Jennifer wants to meet with you. She says she has information about Dad's case that could help other families." Against my better judgment, I drove to the Federal Correctional Complex in Phoenix the following week. Jennifer looked older, harder, her bleached blonde hair showing dark roots. When she sat down across from me in the visiting room, I could see the toll that prison life had taken on her. "Rebecca, I know you have every reason to hate me," she began, her voice trembling. "But I need you to know that I didn't choose to lie about you at that press conference." "Then why did you do it?" "Because they threatened to kill my daughter Sarah if I didn't cooperate." Jennifer's daughter Sarah, now 16 years old, had been kidnapped by members of the Elder Abuse Network who'd identified Jennifer as a potential witness against them. They'd held the girl for 3 days while forcing Jennifer to memorize the false testimony against me. Who kidnapped her? Michael Stevens' brother, Paul Stevens, and 2 other men. They told me exactly what to say. And they had someone watching Sarah during the press conference to make sure I didn't deviate from the script. I stared at Jennifer in disbelief. Why didn't you tell the police? Because they said if I ever revealed the truth, they'd kill Sarah and frame me for child abuse. Rebecca, these people had photos of other families they'd murdered for not cooperating. I was terrified. Jennifer pulled out a thick envelope that she'd been hiding under her prison uniform. But 6 months ago, Paul Stevens was arrested on other charges. That's when I felt safe enough to come forward with this. Inside the envelope were photographs, recorded conversations, and financial records showing that the elder abuse network had been even larger than anyone had realized. Paul Stevens had been running a parallel operation that specifically targeted the family members of people who threatened to expose them. Jennifer, how many other families were threatened like this? At least 30. They had a whole system for silencing witnesses. They'd kidnap children, threaten spouses, even stage accidents to scare people into compliance. The records showed that the network had murdered or threatened family members of potential witnesses in 12 different states. They'd used kidnapping, arson, and staged accidents to maintain a climate of fear that prevented victims from coming forward. Rebecca, there's something else you need to know. Your father wasn't their first murder victim. Jennifer showed me a list of 17 elderly individuals who'd been killed by the network over 4 years. Each had been investigating financial irregularities or threatening to report suspicious medical treatments. They kept trophies, Jennifer whispered, showing me photographs of personal items taken from each victim. Paul Stevens had your father's reading glasses in a box with items from the other people they'd killed. I felt nauseated. The glasses Dad had worn while reading his final letter to me, the ones I'd been looking for after his death, had been stolen by his killers as a souvenir. That evening, I called FBI agent Martinez with Jennifer's information. The revelations led to Operation Final Justice, a coordinated investigation that uncovered the network's witness intimidation program and resulted in 47 additional arrests across 6 states. But the most significant development came 2 weeks later when Paul Stevens, facing multiple murder charges, decided to cooperate with federal prosecutors. His testimony revealed that the elder abuse network had been planning something called Silver Tsunami, a coordinated attack designed to kill 500 wealthy elderly individuals nationwide during a single month, making the deaths appear to be part of a natural health crisis affecting seniors. The plan was to trigger a manufactured epidemic of sudden elder deaths that would overwhelm investigation resources and allow them to steal billions in inheritance money while authorities were too busy to conduct proper investigations, Agent Martinez explained during a briefing with affected families. The network had already selected their targets and begun infiltrating their medical care, financial management, and family relationships. Dad's murder had been a test run for the larger operation, which they'd planned to execute during the following winter flu season. 6 months later, I testified before Congress again, this time about the witness intimidation program that had nearly prevented justice for our family. Senators, the network that murdered my father understood that their greatest threat wasn't law enforcement. It was families like ours who were willing to fight for justice. So they developed a systematic program to terrorize families into silence through kidnapping, murder, and intimidation. Ms. Williams, Senator Rodriguez asked, what would have happened if your brother hadn't accidentally recorded evidence of his own criminal behavior? Senator, we would never have discovered the conspiracy. Marcus's drunken party videos were the only reason investigators had enough evidence to begin the investigation. Without those recordings, the network would have successfully completed Silver Tsunami, and 500 elderly Americans would have been murdered for their inheritance money. As I left the Capitol that day, I reflected on the twisted irony of our family's story. Marcus's attempt to dishonor Dad's memory with that cocaine and stripper party had inadvertently saved hundreds of lives by providing the evidence that exposed a nationwide murder conspiracy. Sometimes the most destructive family moments become the foundation for the greatest justice. 7 years after Dad's murder, I stood in the Rose Garden of the White House as President Harris signed the David Williams International Elder Protection Treaty into law. The treaty, ratified by 12 nations, established coordinated international prosecution of elder abuse networks and created a global database to track suspicious deaths of wealthy elderly individuals. This treaty ensures that criminals can no longer escape justice by crossing international borders, President Harris announced to the assembled crowd of elder abuse survivors and their families. The network that murdered David Williams and 17 other seniors will never again be able to operate with impunity. In the audience sat Marcus, now 45 and clean for 5 years. After his early release for cooperation with federal investigators, he'd become the director of inmate elder abuse prevention programs, working with the FBI to identify and disrupt elder abuse networks operating in federal prisons. But the day's most emotional moment came when President Harris called me to the podium. Rebecca Williams has transformed personal tragedy into global justice, the president said. Her father's murder exposed a conspiracy that led to the prosecution of 187 individuals across 6 countries and prevented the planned murders of 500 additional elderly Americans. As I stood at the presidential podium, I thought about the journey from Marcus's cocaine and stripper party to this moment. The video evidence of his destructive behavior had inadvertently become the foundation for the largest elder protection initiative in history. Mr. President, 7 years ago my brother threw a party to celebrate our father's death. He live-streamed himself doing cocaine, hiring prostitutes, and bragging about inheriting money while Dad's body was barely cold. Those videos went viral and became a social media joke. The crowd murmured uncomfortably. Even now, the story was difficult to hear. But those same videos provided federal investigators with the evidence they needed to expose a murder conspiracy that spanned 6 countries and was planning to kill 500 wealthy seniors in a single coordinated attack called Silver Tsunami. I paused to let the implications sink in. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the foundation for the greatest good we can achieve. My brother's shameful party saved hundreds of lives by accidentally exposing murderers who thought they could kill elderly people with impunity. After the ceremony, I visited Arlington National Cemetery where Dad was buried with military honors after his murder was officially classified as a terrorist attack against elderly Americans. The headstone read, David Williams, Vietnam veteran, father and guardian of elder justice. Marcus knelt beside me at the grave, something he'd never done during his addiction years. Rebecca, I've been thinking about something Dad said to me during his last chemo treatment. What did he say? He told me that addiction makes you feel like you're already dead, so you stop caring about consequences. But he said the people who loved me were still alive, and my actions affected them whether I cared or not. Marcus pulled a folded letter from his pocket. I wrote this to Dad last week. I know he can't read it, but I wanted you to hear it. He cleared his throat and began reading. Dad, I spent 20 years trying to destroy everything you built. Our family, your reputation, your values, your money. The night after your funeral, I tried to turn your house into a crack den and live-stream it for entertainment. But somehow, even in death, you used my destructive behavior to save lives. The videos I made while dishonoring your memory became evidence that exposed the people who murdered you and planned to murder 500 other seniors. I don't understand how you managed to turn my worst moment into something good, but that's who you were. Someone who could find hope in hopeless situations. Marcus's voice broke as he continued reading. I'm 5 years sober now. I work with federal investigators to stop elder abuse in prisons. Last month, information I provided helped prevent the murder of 3 elderly inmates who were being targeted by a criminal conspiracy. I wish you were alive to see that I finally became the son you hoped I could be. But even if you can't see it, I'm going to keep working to honor your memory by protecting elderly people who can't protect themselves. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took me so long to become worthy of being your son. As Marcus folded the letter and placed it on Dad's grave, I realized that our family's story had come full circle. The addiction and greed that nearly destroyed us had ultimately become the catalyst for protecting thousands of elderly people worldwide. That evening, I received a call from Dr. Emma Rodriguez at Phoenix Children's Hospital. Rebecca, I wanted you to know that Jennifer, the little girl whose cancer treatment was funded by your father's donation, graduated from high school yesterday as valedictorian. She's starting pre-med courses in the fall and wants to become an oncologist. Dr. Rodriguez, does she still remember where her treatment funding came from? She wrote her valedictorian speech about your father. She said that a man she never met saved her life, and now she wants to spend her life saving others. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's turning their attacks into something so powerful that it saves lives for generations to come. And sometimes, the brother who tried to dishonor your father's memory becomes the person who helps protect thousands of other families from experiencing your pain. Dad would have been proud of both of us. 10 years after Dad's murder, I received an unexpected call that brought our story full circle in the most profound way possible. It was from Jennifer Williams, not Marcus's ex-wife, but the little girl whose cancer treatment had been funded by Dad's inheritance donation. She was now 18 years old and calling from her freshman dorm at Harvard Medical School. "Ms. Williams, I hope you remember me. You saved my life when I was 8 years old, and now I need your help with something very important." "Of course I remember you, Jennifer. What can I do for you?" "I'm starting a research project on elder abuse prevention, and I want to name it the David Williams Memorial Research Initiative. But first, I need to tell you something I discovered about your father's case." Jennifer had spent her senior year in high school researching the elder abuse network that had murdered Dad as part of her valedictorian project. During her research, she discovered something that federal investigators had missed. "Ms. Williams, your father wasn't the network's last victim. They continued operating after his death, using his murder as a template for an even larger conspiracy. I found evidence of 17 more murders that happened after your father died, but before the network was exposed." My blood went cold. "Jennifer, what are you talking about?" "The network used your father's case as a training example. They studied how they'd murdered him and refined their methods to make future murders even more undetectable. I have documents showing that they called it the Williams Protocol." Jennifer had found the evidence in archived federal case files that had been declassified for academic research. The documents showed that after successfully murdering Dad and nearly getting away with it, the network had systematically replicated their methods on 17 other wealthy elderly individuals over the following 2 years. The only reason the additional murders stopped was because Marcus's viral party videos accidentally exposed them. If your brother hadn't livestreamed that cocaine party, they would have continued using the Williams Protocol to murder elderly people indefinitely. That afternoon, I met with Jennifer at Harvard and reviewed her research. The documents were devastating. Detailed instructions on how to identify vulnerable elderly targets, infiltrate their medical care, sabotage cancer treatments, and steal inheritance money while making deaths appear natural. "Jennifer, have you shared this research with federal investigators?" "That's why I called you. The FBI wants to reopen the investigation based on my findings, but they need your permission to exhume additional victims' bodies for forensic analysis." The 17 additional victims had all died during chemotherapy treatments that had mysteriously stopped working, just like Dad's. Their families had accepted the deaths as unfortunate treatment failures, never suspecting murder. 2 weeks later, I stood in federal court as Judge Patricia Martinez, no relation to our various FBI agents, authorized the largest exhumation order in U.S. history. 17 bodies would be examined for evidence of the same chemotherapy sabotage that had killed Dad. But the investigation took an unexpected turn when forensic analysis revealed something shocking. The network had actually murdered 23 people using the Williams Protocol, not 17. 6 families had never realized their loved ones were murder victims. Margaret Chen from Las Vegas, one of the families I'd contacted years earlier, received a call that changed everything she thought she knew about her mother's death. "Miss Chen, this is Agent Martinez from the FBI. The forensic analysis of your mother's remains shows evidence of deliberate chemotherapy sabotage. She was murdered using the same method that killed David Williams." The expanded investigation, now called Operation Final Williams, resulted in 43 additional arrests across 8 countries. The network had been using Dad's murder as a blueprint for an international expansion that would have killed hundreds of elderly people annually. 6 months later, I testified before the International Criminal Court in The Hague as prosecutors sought to classify systematic elder murder as a crime against humanity. "Your Honor, the network that murdered my father didn't just kill him for money. They studied his murder and used it as training material to kill 23 other elderly people. This wasn't random crime. It was systematic genocide targeting seniors." The court's ruling established elder murder networks as crimes against humanity, making them subject to international prosecution regardless of where the crimes occurred. But the most meaningful moment came during the victims' memorial service at Arlington National Cemetery. Jennifer Williams, now 18 and in her first year of medical school, delivered the keynote address. 10 years ago, a man I never met saved my life by funding my cancer treatment. That man was murdered by people who thought elderly lives were worthless and cancer patients were easy targets." She paused to look at the crowd of families who'd lost loved ones to the network. But David Williams' death exposed a conspiracy that was planning to murder 500 elderly Americans in a coordinated attack. His sacrifice saved hundreds of lives and created international laws that protect elderly people worldwide. Jennifer turned to address me directly. Ms. Williams, your father didn't just fund my cancer treatment. He inspired me to become an oncologist so I can protect other cancer patients from the kind of medical sabotage that killed him. As I watched Jennifer speak about Dad's legacy, I realized that his murder had created something unprecedented. A cancer survivor who'd become a doctor specifically to prevent elder abuse, using research skills she'd developed while investigating his death. Sometimes the most tragic loss becomes the foundation for preventing countless future tragedies. And sometimes, the child whose life you save grows up to become the person who completes your father's mission to protect vulnerable people from predators. Dad would have been proud of both Jennifer and Marcus, two people whose lives were changed by his death, and who'd channeled that change into protecting others.